Okay, well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Basic Science Podcast, where we freely discuss about science, research, and academia. The setting here is a bit too high, but let's see how it goes. There's the screen here hiding, so that's why. But I have a very special guest today, David from or PapaPhD. What are you more familiar with? Like when people meet you, do they say, "Hey, hello, David," or do they say, "Hello,
So
PapaPhD"?
I do get both, and it's funny that because when I created the podcast, I didn't think Papa PhD as kind of a sobriquet for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was the name. The idea was I'm going to talk about what comes after the PhD, and for me, one of the things that came after the PhD was becoming a father, but it was this idea of talking about the human experience of what happens after the PhD and going into that stage of life, let's say. But then somehow it kind of stuck to me, and people sometimes do meet me somewhere and say, "Oh, it's Papa PhD." So I think now I'm kind of accepting it as I'm Papa PhD. I'm this kind of like father figure in the academia,
Mm,
career readiness. I don't know, a PhD advocacy type milieu. So yeah, I accept both.
that's great. So, David, please introduce yourself for people who don't know you like me. Like I'm here to know more of.
So, with pleasure.
Mm,
So, my name is David Mendes. I come from Portugal
mm,
originally, came to Montreal to do the lab part of my PhD. I came from a university in Portugal. And then eventually, at the end of my PhD, I decided and I kind of felt and understood within myself that the academia route and the postdoc route, etc., was not what I wanted to follow, what I felt was going to fulfill me. And then because I only kind of figured that out in the last year or so of the PhD, I had to scramble to, to
mm,
find my way to a career path, which eventually I did by meeting with people. First, by accepting some opportunities that arose. So there was some serendipity there and some being open to some opportunities that arose in my close network. But then networking back to people who were in grad school, I understood that here in Montreal, it's kind of a platform for medical communications, which I didn't know.
mm,
There's a bunch of agencies in continuing medical education, etc.
mhm,
And yeah, I learned about medical writing, and that kind of was my first foray into having a career that was
mm.
that was structured and that was no longer academic. Actually, I have a question. I'm looking at the camera because I'm used to looking at the camera in my studio. Would you rather I look at you, Charles?
It's great. Like this way, you directly speak to the audience, so it's perfect. Actually, like sometimes I also look at the camera, but you have experience with it. Like people sometimes are camera shy, so
Okay.
that's good. That's good.
All right. So I'll switch a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, so the idea, and then I'm gonna now cut the story a little bit short. I did a PhD. In the end, left with some feelings of I wouldn't say failure, but some insatisfaction. But the
Mm,
reason why I started the PhD was because I had back in Portugal taught lab classes in university, and I really felt within myself that I wanted to teach, to be a professor, and well, that ended up not materializing.
mm,
But like I said, I ended up through networking finding a career where I could leverage my strengths, and I worked in medical writing within an agency for almost 5 years. And then I actually discovered that because again we're in Montreal, there's this bilingual. It's also kind of a platform of translation, and I've always had a passion for languages, that I could work on my own as a translator in that domain of
mhm.
medical communications. And now I've been doing a mix of that since with my own
Yeah.
clients.
Hmm.
But the other thing that I did is, yes, I did leave academia, but whenever I got invited to career panels and things like that, I always said yes, because I always felt I went through some tough, for me, tough stuff. Some tough experiences at the end of my PhD. If I can help like a handful
Yeah.
of graduate researchers not go through those things,
Hmm.
it'll be mission accomplished for me. So I always said yes. And one of the things that I understood was that by the end of my PhD, I was feeling, and I think this happens to a lot of people, because it is a kind of a solitary endeavor, the PhD. You
Yeah.
have to, push your project forward. You have to, yes, in a group, yes, with some collaborations or some aspect of collaboration, but it's your baby, let's say.
Hmm.
It also means that often you end up feeling that, oh, these things that I'm going through, like being like mental health or emotionally difficult things, that they belong only to me, and it's probably my problem. It's what's that Taylor Swift song?
Yeah.
It's me.
It's me.
But what I noticed was year after year, so 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years after my PhD, every year there was some people in the audience that were going through the same
Mm.
doubts, the same questions, the same difficulties of thinking, you know what, I just figured out that this is not the path I want to follow. And now
Yeah.
I've invested all these years in this big thing and difficult thing that is a PhD. Is the job market waiting, and waiting with open arms for me, or is it just going to be, me trying to find something to pay the bills,
Yeah.
And this is what led to me starting actually the PapaPhD podcast, which is now called Beyond the Thesis with PapaPhD. So
Hmm.
now you asked me to introduce myself. This is kind of, the introducing me as PapaPhD, as the
Yeah.
person in this space. But apart from that, I don't know, I like meditating. I like martial arts, although now I'm not
Okay.
doing them, but for a big part of my life I was doing mostly Aikido. Then later with my kids, karate. I
Hmm.
like traditional martial arts,
That's great.
traditional Japanese martial arts.
Yeah.
Somehow that's what I gravitate to. Um, what else? I'm Portuguese,
Mm.
so I have. I'm not a soccer person. Although people always think,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're Portuguese, you like soccer." That's not really my thing. But good Portuguese food, and pastries,
That's great. That's great.
natas, etc., etc. I don't know. I have that the Portuguese maybe way of being, that is less, that is
Hmm.
very relaxed. And
Mm.
anyway, that's kind of one of my traits. The other trait that people don't expect, because when you're in front of a camera every week,
Yeah.
people think, "Oh, they're an extrovert." I'm not an extrovert. That's not
Yeah.
real. That's not true. Um, I really discovered this ease of being in the interview context with
Mm.
someone in 2019 when I decided to start PapaPhD. Uh, because I wouldn't have, if you had asked me a few years before, I would have said, "Well, me? No, never. I wouldn't put myself in front of a camera or a microphone." But
Yeah.
yeah, I consider myself an introvert. I know now there's gradations of that. You can be
Yeah.
an ambivert, etc. I don't know really, but I consider myself an introvert.
Mm.
As a kid, I was like shy, uh, timid
Mm.
type. Yeah, I don't know if there's other things that you that you'd like to learn about me, but this is what comes to mind. Just
Yeah, that's good. A good start. Maybe we could also dig deeper, but I really see like a slight mirror of myself in you because for example, I also like arts. Sorry, I used to do taekwondo for
really,
like 16 years. I stopped because of the grad studies. It was like too much on my plate,
of
so I
course.
had to stop. I'm slowly like going back to a more healthy lifestyle. Like I'm taking gym seriously because like usually and
Super important.
your
Yeah.
PhD near at the beginning of your 30s, so still have a few months before hitting the 30s. So I'm trying to like start it on a right foot. And
Of course.
uh, out of curiosity, what was the PhD you went through? What was the program you
The
did?
program. So I got into a program in Portugal,
Mm-hmm.
which is called the BEB, Biology and
Okay.
Biomedicine PhD program at the University of Coimbra.
Mm-hmm.
The specific, so my PhD was in the specialty was cell biology, and here at McGill I was at the BTRC, so at the MNI,
Mm.
working on signaling in the olfactory epithelium,
Okay.
and trying to figure out how the distribution of one signaling molecule and one receptor, so RGMB and neogenin,
Mm.
kind of regulated the development and the timing of maturation of olfactory neurons,
Mm.
which do regenerate throughout life versus other neurons in the nervous system which don't. So that was the little pebble I was trying to put in the
I
wall
see. I see.
of all that research that goes into how to regenerate
Mm.
neurons that got severed or damaged, etc.
Yeah. That's good. Like maybe like I see like even though you said you went through difficulty, I see like you still have this flame of
Oh, yeah.
sharing science in some way. So that's good. And I have a couple of questions on top of my head, but do you think that the podcast you created speaks solely to people in that kind of biology field, or does it reach out to like other type of PhDs, like in humans, like people doing arts or whatnot?
It's a great question. So, of course, when you start something,
Mm.
you go through, at least when I started, I went through my network.
Yeah.
So the first people that I said, you know what, I'm actually going to start a podcast. Who am I going to invite? People who were doing, excuse me, people who were doing their PhDs across from my lab when I was there.
Yeah.
And that are now CEOs of, and they're, or working in government or whatever, that have different careers. So that was, of course, the first universe of people was people from that domain. But from what I understood, and this changed with time.
Okay.
I had this intention of getting a more varied universe of people, and then I was able to do that. But I also think that there's a lot of commonality, even though subjects are different, and sometimes the way people go through the experience of the PhD is quite different, like between social sciences and, let's say, hard sciences or life sciences. There's stuff that's very different. Like people even that are in computing or artificial intelligence. I actually know some PhD students now in that domain, and once your day is done, you save, you close your computer, and then you come back the next day. Although I'm saying this, but people still spend
for sure
humongous number of hours during a week during their PhD. But it's not the same as having mice that are being born on Christmas Eve, that you need to go to the animal room to take care of, or else your experiment goes down the drain. So there's some differences, but there's a lot of commonalities. So for starters, the people I was interviewing were from the life sciences mostly. But now in these last few years, I've really been able to bring people from the social sciences. I've had people from like PhD in tourism, philosophers. So I've been really trying to get a more and more representative cloud, let's say, of past guests that anyone can identify with.
I see. That's good.
Yeah,
that's great. And like you mentioned also education in what you said, and I was wondering, how was it initially a curiosity? Have you tried to teach in academia? How was it for you? And the second part of this question is, obviously, I think podcasts, what's interesting about it is there's educational aspect to it, even though it's not always intended. We always kind of learn from different stories. So like, do you think you kind of catch back this educational aspect with your podcast?
For sure. It's definitely, somehow I'm kind of avenging the fact that I can't do it as a job per se, in a way. But like you said, the form, it's not a specifically educational format, but because I'm trying to bring out information that can help people, I think it plays the same role in a way. But I did, so like I mentioned before, I got into my PhD program in Portugal, I was teaching lab classes of biochemistry and cell biology in Lisbon for a year.
Okay.
And I was just, the kind of a lab TA, exclusively lab, and then we also grade test and whatever, that type of job. And that's when I was like, okay, I saw what I was doing and what we, the team of TAs, were doing, and then I saw the professors teaching class and explaining concepts,
Mm.
and because it was something that I had wanted or that I had envisioned liking to do for a long time, that's when I had because it had been a while from my masters already. I worked a little bit before, between the two. That's when I said, you know what, I'm gonna go for the PhD, because that's what's gonna allow me to maybe. And the idea then was come back to Portugal and
Yeah.
teach.
Yeah.
Actually, the first job I got after the PhD, which was not a full-time job, was tutoring. So that
Okay.
was fun. Also, it was distance tutoring,
Mhm.
already on Skype, and with like they were using these Wacom
Okay.
boards as a
Yeah, I see.
whiteboard that I could use with the person, and it was for the Eastern Township School Board. So it was people who needed. I'm not so good with the yet. Now I have a kid who's going into the secondary, but I'm not so good yet with the Quebec system. But I think they needed to go back and do some specific courses in secondary school, to
Okay.
then go to another CEGEP branch that they didn't have access to without those
I see.
credits. So
Okay.
and that was actually fun, but it wasn't a full-time job. There was like highs and lows in terms of.
Yeah.
And then after almost a year, I got this opportunity to go to medical writing,
Mhm.
because I kept on talking with people, and then that's what became my like solid, like
Mm.
robust, let's say, career after the PhD,
Mhm.
my first one.
That's good. And speaking of the podcast itself, what do you think is the impact you've generated so far on maybe the community, the students?
So what one I have some, I'm lucky enough that
Mm.
4 years have gone by, and that now
Yeah.
I have some feedback from listeners. But the podcast medium
Mm.
is quite particular in the fact that it's like blogging. You have an RSS feed, and then when people are following you, you put a new episode in,
Mm.
and people on their app see, oh, there's a new episode from Beyond the Thesis with PapaPhD. But then there's no organic, very easy, very direct way for them to reach back to the creator and say, hey, I loved your episode. That's not the
Yeah.
way it's built. It's very one way.
Mm.
But through time, the things that I've gotten from people, I've gotten people saying, I could actually pull it up, but this has been, this is, you know what, I'm going to pull it up. I
Yeah,
think
sure.
it's the easiest,
Yeah, go for it.
because I have some of them on my platform here, and it's from people who simply say that this episode really helped me answer this question or this doubt that I had.
Mm-hmm.
This is
That's
something
good.
that I've had. But if I go here, I can tell you.
Would you like the Wi-Fi? I forgot to ask you.
No, it's fine.
Mm.
Okay, here. I
Yeah.
always find myself learning valuable tips for personal and professional development while listening. Highly recommended. This is a very recent one.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's some generic ones. Changed so many things for me. But still.
Yeah.
Now, some of them they asked not to share. This was my friend and guide in my last lap of PhD and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, you know what? And you know what? This one really hit home, because I spent a lot of my PhD in the microscope room,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
that's when a friend kind of turned me on to podcasting, which I wasn't aware of. And it really helped me go through that part of, I need to spend all these hours in the dark in the fluorescence microscope.
Yeah.
And to have someone say, hey, your podcasts helped me in my last lap of the PhD, this, even though I just have a handful of these, I think they kind of comfort me in saying, if these people are coming forward and saying this, it means that this has probably helped a bunch of people out there. Although, because again of the format, I might never get to hear from these people and to know exactly that, I don't know, I helped frank with this or that.
Mhm. But would you think, for that matter, to design something to like connect those listener closer to you? You have
Well,
like ideas in mind for that?
I'm not a programmer per se. I think there are some people. I'm not the only one. I'm not complaining, but that realizes that the medium has this. Let's call it a flaw, although
Mm.
it's by design.
Mm.
But yeah, I think there are people out there trying to do that. But the thing is, the RSS system, it's there's a freedom and there's an ease to it, and
Mm.
and I've seen people coming forward and saying, hey David, we've seen your podcast. We're creating this community on this platform where you can bring your listeners, and you can, and then you're adding friction. And
Yeah.
I think they're not, it's either it's going to become an industry standard, and like Apple Podcasts and all the apps now have this kind of two-way thing to reach
Mm.
out to creators, or it's difficult. It's because people use this medium in this way because it's been designed
Yeah.
to be very easy, very low. How can I say? No, the bar is very low. You don't have to. You just
Yeah.
create. You just sorry. You just install an app, choose what you want to hear, and say and hit play, and that's it. No more. And that's why it works because of the
Exactly.
ease. So, yeah.
It's like the path of least resistance kind of.
Exactly. And
yeah.
as soon as you put a little bit of friction, you lose a lot of people.
For sure.
So the thing is also, because I'm an introvert, because I'm thinking, what's her name? Ologies. Do you know Ologies, the podcast? Ellie Ward. So
okay.
Ellie Ward, she has this great podcast.
Yeah.
It's science. It's kind of science popularization.
Mm-hmm.
But she's a communicator, and she's very out there. I don't know if she's an introvert or an extrovert, but the way she puts herself front and center in her episodes, etc., and also the fact she's on TV and means that people go towards her and have an ease also to reach out to her, because I just very recently put my face on the logo, on the cover art of the podcast, right?
Yeah.
So I've been, let's say, the first 2 years I was kind of hiding behind the microphone and very comfortable with it too. So there was also what I'm trying to say is this part of it is also has to do with my type of personality. If I was more like outgoing, and I don't know, if I was more present in a certain way on social media that was more personal, probably I could have a different answer for you, but it's not the case.
That's good. Maybe I don't know if it's applicable to what you do, but let's because we discussed the common topic, we discussed the support. But do you see the opposite, that you have sometimes negative comments, and how do you deal with that?
The only time, so really, one of the things that that I try to do, and that I've gotten as a feedback from the guests on Beyond the Thesis, is Beyond the Thesis is a safe space, and it's a no, how can I say? There's
no judgment, no.
non-judgmental, and so it's really rare that we will go into something that's very controversial. I'm trying to make a show where I bring people who can share their story and inspire people who are questioning, doubting, etc., or scrambling.
Yeah.
So it's rare that such an occasion will occur. But there's one story.
Okay.
And it's funny because it has to do with the name of the show.
Okay.
I invite this person. It was actually Jonathan Weitzman from the University of one of the universities in Paris, which now I don't remember which one it is. I think it's. I don't want to say because I don't remember exactly, but great guest. He could speak in French, but he's an Englishman, so we did our interview in English. I think it was fine. I published the interview, and then there's one comment that says, "Oh, very interesting conversation, but in this era of in 2022 or whichever year that was, maybe 2021. It's to name the show PapaPhD. It's very patriarchal, and I'm a bit disappointed that was the choice.
Okay, interesting.
And it caught me by surprise because it had nothing to do with our conversation, which was about the fact that he left academia for 6 months, but they told him, look, if in six months you want to come back, we'll keep a seat for you. And then he actually came back, but now he actually kept his connections with the industry, and he actually sends his students in internships, and it was so interesting. And this person was like coming back to us and kind of critiquing us on the name PapaPhD of the show. Wow. And then and I'm not a very a very negative person and or vindicative or whatever. I asked a few of my mentors what they thought, and I had an answer that I thought was the right one for me. And that's what I ended up giving. I ended up explaining why I created that name. I just wrote a paragraph. Look, I was creating a show that I wanted to be bilingual, so the name had to work in English and French because I'm in Montreal. So I wanted to be able to do episodes with English speaking and French speaking. I explained that, and then I said I just became a parent after my PhD. I've had 2 children since, and so for me, part of the post PhD experience was this becoming a parent. I explained that A plus B equals C. this is how I got to PapaPhD. And then in the end, she was like, "Oh, okay, then okay, thanks for explaining." And I don't think I gained a fan, but I kind of diffused it like that. It was seriously the only time that something like that happened. But again, it's not a show where there's any controversy.
Yeah, that's great.
That's probably the reason.
Well, my answer is like, for me, a father is really like a protective figure. So it really fits also the show, which is a safe zone. So I also see maybe some kids didn't really have a good relationship with their parents.
Yeah, it's
true. We cannot
please everyone.
Please everyone. That's the thing. And
keep your idea. But one thing is true is that now the 2 years passed. I started feeling there's always some questioning every year. A handful of people ask me, "Is the show about parenthood during the PhD?" And it isn't at all. Because they're very literal. Some people take things very literally, and that's why in the beginning of the year I changed it to Beyond the Thesis with PapaPhD, which now I think makes it clear, or at least clearer, what it's about.
It makes sense. And the last element I wanted to say, it's really nice of you and to answer that comment, but I don't think also like negativity, we shouldn't waste energy on it, but it's great that you commented. The reason I asked you also is I also received the first negative comment because we're kind of running ad to promote the studio,
of course,
and the person is like in French they said get yourself a job because everyone can talk or speak. Like,
sure. Well, that's something you'll get. And one of the things I've heard some of the podcasts I listen are about our artists, and what I've understood is most of them, or at least a lot of them, they don't look at any comments on any platform, because you know what, people are gonna say these disagreeable things. They're just going to do it because it's easy on a keyboard to go pa 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 and to spew something negative on someone else. I've heard this this thing about it's just talking, and even not so long ago I've heard it. I'd say even a few weeks ago I've heard it from someone quite close, which you know what, it needs to just flow over you and just let it pass. People have their lives, their complications, their difficulties, their challenges, and sometimes, you know what, it comes out by critiquing what others do. And I think there's nothing gained in engaging. And also, depending on is it a person that's closer to you, then you can go like to compassion and and to, understanding and just forgiving.
Mm-hmm.
People who are thousands of miles away behind their keyboard,
Yeah.
you just delete.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Never take it personally.
Yeah.
What you're doing is great. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. Okay, coming back to lighter subjects, let's go back to what you mentioned, and we were discussing this off topic. So you were also so basically your style of podcast is really a live show.
Mhm.
Can you tell us more about your feedback on this format and how do you like experience it so far?
So that's a very interesting question. The first thing that I got, even from a mentor, was, if you are on too many platforms, you're gonna be, diluting your capacity to monetize. Let's say what you do.
Yeah.
Or the other thing you hear is, oh, if you're on YouTube, you're cannibalizing your listens on the audio podcast, and that I have. My experience is not that at all.
Yeah.
There's a YouTube audience.
Mm-hmm.
There's a LinkedIn audience, where's the second place. It's the second. Actually, I think it's the place where I'm the most, because it's actually where I post.
Yes.
And I interact most. But yes, year ago, 2 years ago, I started by inspiration from another podcaster. I started live recording my podcast. So I give the chance of people who have the time and who like being on a live and commenting, to be there while I'm with my guest. And sometimes, you know what, it's really cool because they bring up questions that kind of dynamize the conversation. And I haven't had feedback per se on, wow, it's cool that you do this live, but the fact that people come, and it's a handful again, like we're this podcasting and being on YouTube starts small, so it's always handfuls. We're no Joe Rogans or anything.
Yeah.
But even if there's like 6-10 people who are on a live, I'm super happy. And just that they say, hi, hey David, everything's the audio's fine. It's one of those rare moments as a podcaster where I can have the feeling of I have fans, let's say, or listeners,
Yeah.
and I can actually say hi and thank you. So it is awesome. But now it's interesting, and you can put in one of those SpongeBob things now, because I'm reflecting a little bit.
It's fine,
because it's work, to have to set up this thing of multicasting and of because when I do it, I'm on a platform that sends the same video stream to YouTube, LinkedIn, and lately I've been actually doing it on the 4 places I can, which is also Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah.
But I think the reason I do it is because the fact that it's live, I think, how can I say it, unconsciously gives me and the guest a kind of an invisible motivator to keep the conversation going. And although I tell all the guests, this is a podcast recording, if you need to cough, if you hesitate, don't worry, because the audio, because then what I do, I extract the audio, and then a few weeks later I have the audio version and put it on the podcast platforms.
Yes, yeah.
But the fact that we're live, I think it gives a different energy to the conversation.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the fact of having video, I did have video before, even on Zoom, but the way I do it now, it's very polished, and I can then pick that up. And like we were talking before the recording, I can do I can decline it into different like formats for reels, etc., etc. But I have never. It's a good question. No one has told me, "Hey, David, good job on." I think people appreciate having the possibility of seeing what a recording is live. But yeah, I don't think I've gotten specific feedback on that like that.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, one of my mentors says that whatever you can do that is different from others. So let's say everyone is doing just recording podcasts and then uploading it after post editing, but you're doing a live, so you're being different than others. So even as you said, only a few handful of people are watching you. At least you're getting niched in somewhere that you can slowly grow from there. So that's also like very good.
No, and one thing I discovered is that actually, LinkedIn. And when I got onto LinkedIn, I thought, oh, this is everyone's in suits and ties, which I discovered very quickly that it's not the truth. There's a lot of people in lab coats in there and with different profiles. But I did discover that it's a very important platform for a lot of people, and that people do watch the videos. And although it's a gray business platform, so I'm happy with my choice, and I'll keep doing it, and if I can, I'll keep improving it.
That's great.
As of yet, the thing I've been able to do is to have kind of a nice backdrop with lighting, a little bit like here, different. It's in my basement. It's not in such a nice space, but yeah, small things, small increments, small iterations are needed for you to keep interest in a project,
for sure,
and for you to, at least for me, to feel proud of bringing something each week that I feel is incrementally better each week.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good mindset. Let's tackle the second part of this discussion. You mentioned difficulties through the PhD, and what do you think are the common core of those difficulty, and how the podcast is helping with unwrapping those?
Unwrapping it or unraveling it.
Unraveling, yeah.
So the difficulties Charles is talking about have to do with the fact that someone just just heard it. Is that graduate school, all those things are changing, and there's more and more programs being offered, and there's more and more programs getting graduate researchers to do some science communication, etc., etc. The void that I think is there, the gap that I think is there, and it still needs to be filled with robustly, is career preparation, career readiness, but not just for professorship. Career readiness for all of the other things that you are probably going to become. And I'm thinking of 100 PhDs, right? In terms of percentage, 20%, yes, will become professors, or 15 maybe even, depending on the domains. This percentage changes, but it's quite low, because tenure it's a very narrow corridor, let's say. And then these other 80% of people, they end up a bit like me, having to scramble and to figure out something kind of on the fly at the end. The image that came to mind the other day for me was it's as if you are participating in the American Ninja Warrior. You go through all the things and the rings and the sliders and then whatever, and then you climb the wall, and then you push the button at the end of when you defend your thesis, and then the set transforms into the set of Wipeout, and then there's something that punches you and you fall in the water. That's kind of the feeling I get of what's happening with a lot of PhD and graduate researchers today. Is, yes, come do a PhD, it's great, and then governments are creating more and more scholarships, and it represents the innovation in a country or in a province or whatever. But then when people are having mental health issues at the end because of all the doubt that they're spending 2, 3, 4, 5 years stabilizing their career path after having their degree. They're having to delay life plans like family or having a home, etc., etc. I think something's wrong there. You say, you hear it a lot that it's, the PhD is the highest degree that you can get. But, and this is going to sound bad, I feel that it's the deepest hole that you can dig
Yeah.
professionally. But if you do things well, when you're at the bottom of the hole, you've also built a gigantic catapult
Mm.
that will, slingshot that will project you into a great career. But you need to start preparing from year one, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's not being pushed by universities enough, at least. I'm going to say enough. I was going to just stop at not being pushed by universities. There needs to be more openness from day one that, okay, you're going to come for a PhD. There's one chance in 5 that you're going to become a professor. So let's work on for this other 80% of people.
Yeah.
Let's show you the multiverse of things you can do, and let's
Mm.
start you on a path to finish your degree, to defend, and to be having great professional conversations the next day instead of after 2-3 years. That's kind of my battle right now.
Okay.
Does it make sense to you? Is it scary what I'm saying?
It's definitely probably something that could shock someone who never went through the complete academic path, and then they see all those difficulties and roadblocks. But one question is: have ever institution reached out to you to kind of do something together, a collab or something, to figure things out?
So no academic institutions have.
Mm.
And again, as
Yeah.
of yet, I'm in year 4 of my podcast. I consider I'm a small
Yeah.
fry.
Yeah.
I'm a small podcaster. I'm starting to get visibility and anyway and because it's bilingual, also in France, overseas.
Yeah.
But I still consider I'm small. Also, the podcast is not a business for me. It's something I do on the side. So if it was my business, I would probably be going to universities and selling something, or at least selling the podcast as something. So the answer is no to that. But there's things coming up in the next year that resemble something like that. There's a big collaboration that's coming up, and that has to do with projecting PhDs, freshly minted PhDs, into very different universes out there. So keep your ear open, and you'll see something happening. I think in fall already.
That's great. Maybe I'll switch my question. Is if you ever have, like, if you in the near future an institution ever try to reach to you, do you think it's a possibility? Do you think the mindset in those institutions is slowly changing? Is it still the old rigid way and nothing will change, and we need third parties like us to do something and bring a voice to that? What do you think about all this?
I think things are changing actually. So there's an association, and now I think it's CAGS, Canadian Association of Graduate, and it's not studies. Let's just
sure.
CAGS. And so they invited me for a keynote, and and the keynote was called the Street Smart PhD, and I was kind of pushing this idea of you need to start preparing today. I don't need to look for it. Well, let's. Now, Canadian Association for Graduate Studies. That was it, after all.
That's great.
And so I think there's some antennas are receiving this signal. There's things changing. I think some large universities are doing things. I see things in the States, but the academia is such a huge space that I don't see a groundswell that's kind of going everywhere right now. But if you're asking me to do this kind of a prediction or divination, I think it's probably something that might happen in the future. Yes, because I think students are more aware. I feel that the career offices or career services also probably are, although often they're very busy with undergrads. So yeah, I think things like what I do, things like what you've done with your other podcast are important to just have more and more conversation that is freely available out there, so that people listen, so that people are inspired, and so that some of these questions are normalized. Yeah. I think things are on the verge of starting to change. Let's say like that.
That's a good point, and I will say it as president of my own student association of the institute. We also recently, well, a couple of months ago, we had a meeting with different institute as well, and the point we thought would that could be game changer is to maybe unionize as every like grad student association in Montreal and
Okay.
do something like this. Will that happen in the next few years? That would be great. I hope I could initiate that movement, but
Yeah. Well, I'm not. So this is more on the policy side of things, and
just switch something here.
yeah,
The camera
no
closed.
worries.
But you can talk.
Oh, I can go on talking. I'm not so good at the policy side of things, but I did have a conversation, so an interview with the scientist in chief of Quebec, and there's difficulties there. So I know that in Europe, in some European countries, you're actually depending, I know on as because even postdocs in some places they're just trainees.
Yeah.
In Europe, some places they're actual employees. But the difficulty is as soon as you, from what I understood from my conversation with Mr. Kirian, as soon as you say, okay, the PhD scholarship is now a salary, then it becomes taxed, and then there's all this tax money that goes out of the student's pocket.
Yeah.
And so there's from what I understood, it's more complicated than that, and but the it's a little bit like asking the private people to, I don't know, do zero déchet in English
Yeah.
is zero
Zero waste.
zero waste, to do zero waste to
Mhm.
fight against climate change.
Yeah.
Who actually, the governments need to decide things and change industry. Sorry, I'm getting maybe outside of the scope, but there's a question here to me of, is a union of students really going to change things, or does government need to the higher ups need to do something? But then if students get together to demand things, that's of course that's also always important, advocating for yourself. But
yeah.
it's not an easy question. It's been, academia is an age-old
Yeah.
institution, and it's hard to make things change. And also, we're not, since a few years back already, in a stage where there's a lot of money for research. I think we're not at that stage. So the fact that there's not a lot of money means that there's not a lot of money for graduate researchers either.
Yeah.
Etc. Etc. It's a complicated question. I wish it came from universities, and I wish it came from, okay, you know what? Let's kind of accept that we've been that there's been some false representation in the last I don't know 20, 30 years, because we've been saying we want more PhDs, but actually the number of tenure track positions are dwindling.
Yes.
And so we've been doing this, it's wrong, and we need to repair that, and we need to really give tools. If people want to keep on staying in the university environment after their bachelor's, after their master's, and do these 5 years of research, it needs to be worth their time, and it needs to be worth that investment, and they need to not be so so far behind compared to someone who has the same age but stopped at the master's.
Exactly.
It takes, from a study that came out, I wonder if it was from CAGS. Now oh my gosh, you know what? I think I'm mixing up my acronyms, but There was a study, and I may have mixed it up. I'm not sure it was CAGS that for whom I did the keynote, but it was a Canada-wide association of graduate students, etc. But what the numbers said was it took 6 years after the PhD for people to catch up to someone who stopped.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Who stopped at the master. So it's a long time, and it's a long time in a key age range of your life where important things are supposed to be happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think for me the PhD is also, like you mentioned, an opportunity to dig deeper, not only on the like maybe the scientist or just the project part, but also dig deeper within you. So you kind of truly also find your kind of purpose and what you want to do in the future. So this way you can propel yourself like even further. And I think, like the institutions are really lacking that motivation behind like tutoring or forming PhD students. And
they're going for results, for papers, so we get published, and then we can get more money through grants, because there's the interest in what's happening within the person who is in graduate school. They do offer mental health services, etc. If at least they did when I was in graduate school. But there needs to be an institutional mission of propelling people who decide to go that route, which is going to be difficult, which you're going to blood, sweat, and tears, to propel them at the end to have the shortest possible interval of doubt, trepidation, until they have that first great career conversation. The point. So there's this aspect of introspection and getting to know yourself. One thing that I try to kind of tack on to this is the PhD. Very often, because of what it is, gets you get tunnel vision. You're kind of asked, or not required, but you're kind of pushed into going into tunnel vision. Sometimes you let go of a martial art that you did for 16 years, which is wrong. I'm not saying that you did something wrong. You did what everyone does, but it shouldn't be, because guess what? That's something that you did for 16 years clearly is something important to you, and it should be allowed to be part of you as a graduate researcher. And actually, it should be really cool to have a researcher that's also a Taekwondo black belt. Anyway, and we're saying Taekwondo because it's what you mentioned, but it could be theater, it could be
anything,
whatever. And a lot of people let go of hobbies, let go of people, let go of groups, to go into this adventure. And it'll happen to some extent because, like you said, you mature, you change, you're kind of cooked by the whole process, and you come out a different person. But where I want to go back, because I was telling people and telling you, I'd love for people from day one to start thinking of the multiverse of things that they can do after. And people might think, but how do I do that? It's not you can by introspection find something, but what you need to do, and what's easy to do today, especially we were talking about LinkedIn, is talk with people that are not in your close circle. People who are not in your lab or even in your institute, but who were in your institute 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Where are they now? Oh, how did you get there? It's super cool. So you did the same PhD as me, and now you're working at Google. How did that happen? And then 2 weeks later, find another person, and this can lead to one thing. It'll lead to is you'll start creating that map of different things that can happen, and you won't feel like, oh, if I don't become a professor, I have failed. You won't have failed, because now you see that the professor continent is just one continent on this whole planet of things that you can do. So it's the second, and the second thing that can happen, if you're lucky, is you might even find a mentor or different mentors for different aspects of your life, and you only get that by putting on your calendar somehow every 2 weeks or every month. Okay, on the fourth Friday of each month, I I find someone that I put on my calendar, and I go on LinkedIn and I send them a short message saying, "Hey, I see that you were where I am today and like 5 years ago. I'm really curious on about how you got to where you are today and about what you do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just love to chat for 15 minutes of your time and ask some questions. Do that once a month. You'll have a treasure trove by the end of your PhD, and you won't go through the stress and the anxiety and the anxiousness that I went through and that a lot of people still go through today."
Yeah. My question here is how much do you think the peer pressure is on, self restricting ourselves from all those, and versus how much we're in like putting on ourselves like those restrictions. Because one of the reason I'm saying this is I think also I saw a mindset shift in myself when I started to say, hey, there's also all my self person that I really wanted to develop um, uh, during my PhD that I didn't had the opportunity to do yet. So I only did that. Sorry, not the first year, but more toward the fourth and fifth year of my PhD. And
Which
now
is
I
typical.
realize that I should have done this uh, through my first year. Actually,
That's totally normal, because what happens is
Mm.
when you get that yes to a PhD program, you're over the moon happy.
100%. Yeah,
You get into university, into the lab, and you're wide-eyed.
yeah,
And there's kind of this honeymoon period,
yeah.
which is normal.
Mm.
That's why I say that the onus, and in my point of view, is on the programs, because it's normal to have this feeling and to have this, to even spend 2 years in this I'm in Disneyland type
Yeah.
thing. The onus should be on the programs, on the supervisors to say, "Hey, okay, you're super happy to be here. We're super happy to have you here, but if you really want to help yourself, you need to sprinkle a little bit. You're gonna have to to work a lot on your project. You have to produce some sound science,
Mhm.
but you're gonna have to pepper in some working on your career readiness from day one, and the responsibility cannot fall only on you because of this natural reaction of being enchanted and of feeling I have arrived. Now I'm in science.
Yeah.
And guess what? This science that you arrived is going to kick you out in 4, 5, 6 years, because that's the way it is.
Mm.
And so it's yeah, there should be one thing. I'm talking to you and thinking there should be kind of first year mentors, or people who are just there just to coach you with dealing with that and with kind of putting things in perspective, and allowing you to be excited and happy, but also giving you some tools to start preparing things that are a little bit too far away for
Yeah.
your brain to be, and your system, your mind to be able to say, okay, we need to start working today. 5 years, 6 years, it's a little bit too far. It starts getting real, like you said, on year 4, 5. That's when you're like, oh, okay, now I need to do something.
Yeah.
And if things are not going smoothly, which was my case, even in year 4, 5, you're just trying to troubleshoot and whatever, and then you wake up and it's, oh my gosh, okay, I need to turn in my thesis and defend, and I didn't do anything to prepare. So
Yeah.
you already, you probably already did something right even before I did. But it's there needs to be something in there in the system that's not optional,
Mm.
that everyone that starts should get, that would kind of coach them to deal with that kind of, I'm at Disney World, and kind of forget that actually you're also in North America, and you're also on planet Earth, and things are still happening around you. People are paying taxes, and etc. etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, mentorship, kind of a peer
Yeah.
peer program. I don't know. I'm just thinking
Mm.
on the fly here, but
Yeah. You speak about all those elements, and I kind of realize how lucky I am, or the people are in my institute, because they have this academic affair system
okay.
where it's really the bridge between students and professor and the institute. And really what they organize is like a yearly um, networking event where they invite graduates to speak about the current jobs. They also have this kind of marin parrain
Okay.
system for newcomers, so
Okay.
they kind of get acquainted with the environment and everything. So it's really good.
That's very cool.
But there's also disparity, like from speaking to those association, when we started to realize that there's actually differences. Like not all the institutions are the same, not all the student association are seen the same. So, for example, there's this one association that is in the hospital that get zero money from their institute to organize events for the students.
Oh, wow.
They don't even have an academic affairs system where they're represented through employees to directly. So there's still a lot of work to do.
That's why, and it's super cool that you and super lucky. You should be grateful to have that. But like you said, it's asymmetrical. It's not widespread at all. And and when you think that a lot of people, and it was my case, but every year actually move countries to start their PhD. So there is I think there's it's easy because a lot of these graduate students come from abroad, so they don't really have a huge social network when they arrive. It's really easy to not only be maybe overly grateful that they were accepted into the program, be wide-eyed, like I said, but also to kind of get caught into, okay, now your life is only the PhD, and that's where I think there should be a widespread change in culture, and to say, okay, if more and more people are willing to do a PhD, there needs to be some change in how the experience of the PhD as a young person starting is, in terms of considering their life as a whole, and not only those 4, 5, 6 years that they're there.
Exactly.
Are they gonna have easy and good professional outcomes when they leave, or are they going to suffer or to feel that they have failed somehow? This needs to be reflected upon and changed, because it's unfair that after all this effort and all these years, that it is not that it takes so long to kind of catch up with people who kind of left the path a little bit earlier on. It shouldn't be. People should have great outcomes, great avenues, and be supported towards that.
Yeah, I agree. Like what you said is where the PhD is the highest possible level of education a society could afford to give to someone. So let's make it the mirror of that.
Yeah. Let's make it that people actually not only have a fantasy of what a PhD is and permits, but actually have role models and have examples, and no, you know what? I'm going to do a PhD, and then I'm going to, because I have this idea of launching this company on this very niche domain that is at the cutting edge of science. This should be, and of course I'm taking a very specific thing, but some people go into science communication, people go into even arts related to science, but then there's government, there's the municipal sphere also needs scientists. There's so many different spheres of life where you can have a fulfilling and productive life as someone who comes with a very strong scientific background. And I think conversations like this are great to kind of normalize this.
For sure. So, David, do you have any last comments to the audience? You want to leave them with a message?
First message: follow Charles' channel. What's the name of the channel actually?
So it's under my name. So it's Stories by Charles 94 on
Perfect.
YouTube.
Well, follow the channel because Charles is putting a lot of effort in making these happen, and it's a really cool format. I had a lot of fun, and it was really really cool spending this time here with you. So that's the first thing, to give you some props and to ask people to go follow you. Um, if you so one of the things I've talked with over 150 guests on Beyond the Thesis with PapaPhD, and if you ask me, well, okay, what's the one thing I can just do? One thing from you can just give me one piece of advice that I can apply. It certainly, undoubtedly, is put on your calendar time to talk with new people with at a certain regular frequency, starting as early as possible in your graduate school, and you can even be the masters, and you could even not be in the PhD. You can even be in your job and hearing this conversation. Open your circle of knowledge of what's out there a little bit more each week or each 2 weeks or each month, and you will gain dividends from that. Especially if you're starting a PhD, it's going to be 4 or 5 years on this other planet. 4 or 5 years, one conversation per month. It's a strong, robust network, and this is the easiest, simplest way to learn about what's out there professionally, and to eventually be able to retrace a conversation that 5 years you get your degree, etc., and you have a conversation about a potential position. You'll probably, if you started at the beginning of your PhD, you'll be able to retrace it to one of these conversations that you've had, because in 4 or 5 years you take part in other conversations, you get into groups, and organically people will get to know you and they'll remember you. The one thing that I'm going to go now to the opposite. What not to do. Don't start networking just the moment you need a job. It's the worst type of conversation that you can have. People will know you're just looking for a result, and they'll probably tell you, sorry, I don't have time for that. The best way to get to know people and to get them to be relaxed and sharing their knowledge, their story with you, is if you're not expecting anything from them. So start early. That would be it.
Okay, great. Thank you for coming, David, and it was a pleasure discussing.
Well, my pleasure. Can I just say one last thing?
Of course.
If you like podcasts, you can find Beyond the Thesis with PapaPhD in all the podcasting platforms. If you're more visual, if you're on LinkedIn, PapaPhD or Beyond the Thesis actually is on LinkedIn. But if you look for my profile, you'll find the videos there. And then you have the PapaPhD channel also on YouTube. So go follow us there. It'll be a pleasure to have you in the tribe.
Thank you, David.